On today's episode of The Lawyer You Know, we are going to react to the press conference for the lawyers for one of the defendants charged in storming the Capitol and stealing Nancy Pelosi's lectern. And it's unfortunately going to be a lesson on what not to do in a press conference. The media wants press conferences with all defense lawyers in big criminal defense cases, so this is nothing new. And it's not a surprise that we see these lawyers on the courthouse steps in the federal building over here in Tampa, in our backyard, and we see these lawyers answer some questions in a way that is just not the way you want to do it as a criminal defense lawyer. So we're going to roll the clip in its entirety first, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece and tell you what not to do as a criminal defense lawyer.
It could be worse, but I think part of what you have to, factor into is, again, you just have to drill down on what actually happened. You have a photograph of our client, in a building, unauthorized to be there with, what appears to be a podium or a lectern. I'm not exactly sure which one it is called, but that's what we have.
Obviously, that presents problems for you as a defense attorney in that you have your client in the building at the time of the break-in.
I don't know how to else explain that, but yeah, that would be a problem. I'm not a magician, and neither is Mr. Bigney. So yeah, we've got a photograph of our client who what appears to be inside the federal building or inside the Capitol with government property.
When it comes to the...
Okay, so it was so nice he had to say it twice apparently. So at the end of this, he says he's not a magician. Criminal defendants hire a lawyer to be a lawyer, not a magician. They don't hire you to practice magic, they hire you to practice law. And there are tons of ways that you can defend a case like this. There are tons of defenses in a case like this. I'll bring my dad on, who's one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state, if not the country. And he's had every job from a prosecutor in the state court, a federal prosecutor, the chief assistant to the U.S. attorney, all the way to a private criminal defense attorney now. I may bring him on later to talk about what defenses there could be in a case like this if you don't give a press conference like this as a criminal defense attorney. Let's talk about specifically what he says that is so damaging to his client's case.
It could be worse, but I think part of what you have to, factor into is, again, you just have to drill down on what actually happened. You have a photograph of our client, in a building, unauthorized to be there with...
Okay, he says you have a photograph of our client in a building that he's unauthorized to be there. Okay, so he's first admitting that the photograph is of his client. He's self-authenticating that photograph. That is an objection, an evidentiary argument you could have as to who can authenticate that that's actually his client. Now, some of you may say it's obvious it's his client. Fine, but he doesn't need to admit it to the press for everybody to see and know. Potential jurors could be watching this. Number two, he says he is in a building and he's unauthorized to be there. So I think something that's important as we go through some of this attorney's quotes is to talk about what Adam Johnson, the guy in this video and apparently in the photograph, according to his attorney, is charged with. He is charged with one count of knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority. And what does this lawyer say? We have a photo of our client in a building and he's unauthorized to be there. Basically giving forward evidence to the first count that his client is charged with.
Authorized to be there with, what appears to be a podium or a lectern. I'm not exactly sure which one it is called, but that's what we have.
Obviously, that.
And he says he's standing there in the picture with a lectern or a podium. We're not too sure what it's called. So now he's saying that he has something in his hand that doesn't belong to him. So going back to what Adam Johnson is charged with, he's charged with one count of knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority. Then one count of theft of government property. Standing there with a lectern or a podium in his hand, admitting that his client is in fact doing what he's charged with in the photograph, authenticating a photograph of the crime being committed. I don't understand how a defense attorney thinks this is going to help his client. We're all for plea deals when a client admits they did something wrong. If they want to plead guilty, if they want to, say that they want to pay the price for their crime, that's all good and well, and you can do that in court. You can do that with the prosecutors. You can do that with the judge. What you don't do is admit all that at the beginning of the case after his first appearance on the court steps of the federal courthouse, knowing that millions and millions of people are going to watch this press conference, and you're basically admitting everything that your client did, and everything that they're saying about your client is correct. Then it seems like the reporter understands what's going on better than the lawyer as he says, well, that sounds pretty bad. It's your client in the building with the podium, and that's his picture.
Or a lectern, I'm not exactly sure which one it is called, but
Let's watch
that's
again.
what we have.
Obviously, that presents problems for you.
Obviously, that presents problems.
That you have your client in the building at the time of the break.
The lawyer laughs. He giggles as if this is something that's, this is kind of funny or seems like a joke. And I don't know this guy. I don't know this lawyer. He is in Orlando. He's probably a good lawyer. He looks like he's been doing it a lot longer than I have. He's team long hair, don't care. So I always have to recognize that. I always have to love that. I love lawyers that have long hair because it's the best way to do it. But I just don't understand why he's laughing about something that has created an issue for his client where he had to post $25,000 of bond. He's looking at federal prison time. These are federal offenses. He's losing his gun. He's losing his passport. He's got a curfew. He can't travel outside the state except to court appearances in D.C. It's not something that's funny, and this is something that's very terrible for your client.
I don't know how to else explain that, but yeah.
He says, I don't know how else to explain it. Well, you know how else you explain it? It's pretty simple. When you have the beginning of a criminal case and a lot of unknowns, whether there's pictures or video evidence, there's video evidence and pictures in lots of criminal cases. And how you explain it is there's a lot that's still left to uncover. We're not sure of all the facts in the case. We don't know everything that happened. There's a lot of discovery for us to go through, and we're going to determine what actually happened once we get all the discovery, once we get all the facts, and once we talk to all the witnesses. That's how you explain it. You don't say, yeah, this is my client, this is a picture of him committing the exact crimes that he's been charged with.
Magician, and neither is Mr. Bigney. So yeah, we've got a photograph of our client who it appears to be inside the federal
and he
building,
says it a second time.
Capitol with government property.
When it comes to the
And he even says, this is him inside the federal building, inside the Capitol. Okay? Again, that's self-authenticating. This picture, it could be a green screen behind the guy in the picture. I don't know. I'm not saying that's a defense, but you don't have to actually authenticate the photo that it is, where it is, what it is, who it is, and what he's doing.
court date that he has, will he be there physically, or will you guys go to represent him?
If he's required to be in court, he'll be in court.
The other lawyer keeps it very tight-lipped. He says if he's required to be in court, he'll be in court. We'll see what's going to happen. He doesn't say he's a magician. He doesn't authenticate the photo. He doesn't admit what his client did. Later in the video, they say he regrets what he did. Again, just admitting that their client committed a crime over and over again in different ways. And that's just not something you do as a criminal defense attorney. If your client wants to admit it, if he wants to plead guilty, if he wants to work out a deal, that's fine. That's his prerogative. But as his attorney and as his mouthpiece, you should not go admitting these crimes that your defendant committed in front of the national public so they can just watch this video and listen to you say it over and over. And later in other articles, I've seen that this client, Adam Johnson, has gotten death threats. He's a father of 5, a stay-at-home dad, and he's getting death threats. Do you think this helps as his attorney? To admit that he did this, to admit that he did it exactly how everyone thinks that he did it, to admit that he stormed the Capitol and stole government property, as opposed to maybe there's some kind of intoxication defense. Who knows? The point is all the facts haven't come out yet, and there's no reason for them to nail it down the way that they did. It just makes their client look bad and it confirms that their client's guilty. It doesn't just make him look guilty. It is confirming that their client is guilty. I feel bad for clients that see themselves in this situation. I mean, we've seen documentaries in the past, and we've done a podcast on the Making a Murderer documentary where one of the court-appointed lawyers in that case for the defendant came on a press conference. He knew it was a big news story, and he said, yeah, well, my client's guilty. There's not much I can do about it. That type of stuff is just so unfair, and it's not the justice system that's supposed to be set up, and it's not the justice system you would want if you were accused of a crime. Whatever you may think about this guy, whatever you may think about the stupid things that he did, whether he's guilty, what his punishment should be, fine. But lawyers in the process are supposed to protect the rights of their clients. If they know how to do it the right way, they're supposed to do it the right way. It's not supposed to be about their fame. It's not supposed to be about their 15 seconds of fame at a press conference so everybody can hear what they say. It's a beautiful head of hair that guy has, but it's not about him. It's about his client. And I think that he knows that. I'm not trying to, be too harsh on the guy. Like I said, I'm sure he's a good lawyer. I'm sure he's been doing it a long time. He just probably got caught a little off guard in this press conference. I think he regrets what he said, and I don't think he'll be saying things like this again in future press conferences dealing with this client. So keep an eye out. And now you guys know when you see these press conferences of lawyers, they should be tight-lipped, they should be vague, and they should leave things open to interpretation because there are so many facts that come out later in cases that you don't know at the beginning, that you don't know at first appearance. So lawyers should not come to any conclusions. They should not make any declaratory statements like this lawyer did. And press conferences should be a time where they just say, we're still fact-finding, we're going to represent our client vigorously, and we're going to figure out what happened. We're going to get down to the bottom of this. We're going to get all the facts before we make any determinations. So keep an eye out for any press conferences you see where lawyers are speaking on behalf of their clients. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you like this content, push the like button for us. Hit that subscribe button so you can be alerted anytime we come out with new videos.